Welcome to the HMO Property Show. By investors, for investors. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing. Whether you're a seasoned investor, a new landlord, or just curious about property investing, this is the podcast for you. Sponsored by the Co-Living Collective, your trusted partner in creating vibrant and sustainable shared living experiences. Visit us at colivingcollective.com.au to learn more.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host, Neil Gabe, and today I want to talk to you about the power of debt reduction in your property portfolio. And the reason I want to do that is because for so long I've just been focused on cash flow, replace your income, have financial freedom. And whilst interest rates are at 3, 4 and 5%, that was relatively straightforward to do. However, fast forward to today's current climate and interest rates are a lot higher than what they have been previously. And a lot of people that were purchasing at 3% and getting positive cash flow from a 5% standard investment property were cash flow positive and now currently 15, 20, 25 grand underwater. And I didn't mean to laugh at that there. That's just the current state of the market. And what that has happened with the HMO model is we're not negative cash flow by any stretch of the imagination. We're still positive cash flow, but the cash flow is just not as high at the minute. So what we've started to look at as a business and at our own portfolio also is how do we reduce the debt position that we're in so that we don't have to rely on the bank so heavily. And once we're debt free in our portfolio, once our LVR is at a certain threshold, what does that look like? What's our cash flow position then? Because we speak to lots of investors on a daily basis, right? And some of them are earning really good money. And when we show them the HMO in today's numbers with a 7% interest rate, it's generating $5,000 to $10,000 a year cash flow positive. And to someone that's earning 250 grand a year, 5 or 10 grand a year additional cash flow isn't really going to be a life-changing sum of money to them. So what we've been looking at is I'll take a step back as well. The reason that they're producing 5 to 10 grand a year cash flow is because with a new build HMO, the lenders that we work with in this space currently only offer a principal and interest term mortgage pre-construction. So post-construction, well, not post-construction, during construction, sorry, the interest rate is currently 7.9% and it's interest only for the construction phase. And they will do these loans at 80 and 90%. 90%'s got a higher interest rate and it's got additional LMI fees in there as well. I think the LMI, or they call it a risk fee, but the LMI in the loan for a 90% is 3.25%, which means that you need to put 13.25% deposit down and they will lend you 90% of the mortgage or the value of the property. And at 80%, believe it or not, there's still a risk fee attached to these loans. And that is 1.5%. So you're essentially putting down 21.5% and getting 80% lend from the bank. And it's a bit of a hybrid model, right? So they use a commercial valuation to derive the value of the property. And then they use a residential lending package at 80 and 90% LVRs to lend you the money. So it's cool the way they're doing it. These lenders are aggressive in this space. They want to lend money on this style of product because they can see the value in it. And the other thing that I can see coming in the future, right, is because someone has now come out and blazed the trail and showed the mainstream lenders and the first and second tier lenders that there's a new option out there, there's a new style of product in the market, which is the HMO and the NDIS, and it's actually less risk than a standard investment property because it rents out for twice as much and it's got multiple streams of income from the same property. Then it's not going to be long before the big boys, and by the big boys I mean the big four, the Westpacs, the NAB, the Commonwealth and the NAB. It's not going to be long before these guys start to go, ooh, what's going on over there? These guys look like they've worked out all the problems and reduced the risk that we used to see in that product. Looks like it's going pretty well for them. Let's get involved in this space. And when them guys do come in, it's probably going to be more attractive interest rates, better terms around the construction phase of this because there's additional fees tagged into these properties. But the main thing is the market's moving, right? The market's moving in the right direction. Capital growth is going up room rates and rent across the board is increasing, which means if you're not in the market now, then you're not in the market because of, a few grand here and there, or a few $10,000 here and there, then when you've got an $800,000 or $900,000 property that's increasing 10-20% a year, you're missing out on some significant capital growth and making your money work hard for you so that you don't have to work hard for your money. So in this episode, what I want to do is show you how paying down debt can increase your position, your wealth position, by reducing your LVR, increasing your cash flow position, and making you look more attractive to the bank, so that if you do want to refinance again, you're in a position so that when you go there, they go, well, these guys have had a loan for 2 or 3 years. They've already reduced the debt on that loan by X amount, and the property's increased by that amount. So we want to lend them more money. And the reason that I've got the screen, the whiteboard open on this is, if you're listening just on the podcast, then there will be some visual aspect to this episode, and I advise you to probably jump onto YouTube to watch this. I'll try and articulate the best I can, but I am from Middlesbrough in the UK, and articulation probably isn't my strong point, but I will try my best to talk you through what I'm drawing on the whiteboard for the people that are watching this on YouTube. So the standard investment model, or the standard process for your standard buyers agency that's out there that target high growth areas, and they say what we want to do is we want to purchase what they call a series of foundation properties, and some of them want to add value through renovations, stuff like that. So you might buy it for 400, you might spend 30 grand in a reno, you might get it revalued at 470, fantastic, and then you'll get capital growth in there as well. What happens is the debt component for these properties never reduces. In fact, it actually increases the more that you leverage into more and more properties. So you might buy this for 400k, you might buy the second one for 400k. I'll keep it nice and simple. You just buy all 4 properties for 400k, but you've got 20% LVR on all of these. So in fact, let's do 10%, because you've gone in aggressive. You want to go fast. And at different stages of this journey, your debt position has increased. Now, the banks are risk averse. The banks will lend you money if they know they can get it back from you. So if you put a high deposit into a property, then there's a good chance the banks will lend you more money. If you're going into 10% LVRs and you leverage it extremely high, that's when the banks start getting a little bit nervous, and they go, we're not too sure on this. And we use the phrase tapped out. You get tapped out by the banks because your debt to income ratio is too high. You're negatively geared. Your negatively geared properties have reduced your income. So when you're presenting yourself to the bank, you no longer earn $100,000 a year. You earn $40,000 less, which is $60,000, and you're trying to apply for another $400,000 mortgage with only 60 grand's worth of income because you've allocated $40,000 to other 4 properties to prop them up. So I hope that makes sense. So I'll just make my head a little bit smaller on the screen. So here you've got a 390k debt because you put a 10% deposit down. Sorry, 390k. 360k debt because you put a 40% deposit down, right, on that property. But then you've leveraged into the next one because it's gone up in value. And I'm not going to go through all the mathematics, but essentially you're going to end up with 360k times 4. It's obviously going to be higher because these properties are going to increase for you to leverage into them. But this only needs to go up to 450k for you to then leverage into the next one. But then this debt increases by 50k again. So all of a sudden your debt position has gone from 360 to 410 because you've leveraged into the next one. This one again will go up 50k for you to leverage into the next one. And then you've got a 410k debt again. Same again, we leverage into the next one. It's gone up by $50,000, 410k. Real simple numbers, guys. There's obviously strategy costs, stamp duty, buyer's agency costs. There's all these different things that get added into there. But for the purpose of this exercise, I'm going to keep it as simple as I can. And then you leverage into your next one and you've got $410,000 worth of debt and 50k increase in value. So your property portfolio has gone up. It's now worth 450, 450, that's 900 times 2. You've now got a $1.8 million property portfolio. Excuse me. But you've also got 4 mortgages at $410,000 a pop. So that's 4, 8, 12, 16, $1.640 worth of debt. Now, the traditional model looks like this. This is capital growth. And this is debt. So let's say this debt here is 1.6 mil. And your capital growth now means your property portfolio is worth 1.8 mil. So you've got $200,000 worth of equity in your property portfolio. So your net worth is essentially $200,000. What's it cost you to do that? It's cost you 4, 8. It's cost you 160k to do it. So, well, it's actually only cost you 40 grand because you only put 10 down in the first one and you leverage. So you've gone from 40k to 200k, which is 4, 8, 1.6. So you've 5x your wealth. Hold on. The problem with this is these properties are renting out at a 4 to 5% yield. Let's be super aggressive and say they rent out for a 6% yield. But the lend from the bank is also a 6%. And by the time you add in property management fees and your bills, etc., each one of these properties is negatively geared by, let's say, 10k per year. So that's you paying 40 grand per year to keep your property portfolio afloat. And the problem with this is this only works if you do. This only works if you work, because you can only offset these losses against your income. If you lose your job, if you get injured, if there's redundancies at work, this property portfolio does not care. It still needs that $40,000 a year to prop it up. And again, these are very simple numbers. So what we've come across at the HMO Property Co, as I've sat down and I've been like, yeah, great, cash flow is fantastic. And it is fantastic. But how do we use that cash flow to reduce our debt position so that the banks find us more attractive? Because at some point here, you're going to be tapped out. You've only got 200 grand's worth of equity. For a 40k input, that's really good, don't get me wrong. But income is the outcome that we want to achieve, right? Income is the outcome. We invest in properties to produce enough income so that we can retire and live off the income from our property portfolio. And what some of the gurus do out there, right, is they might sell down the first 2 properties and then they'll pay off the debt or pay down the debt on the best 2 properties, for instance. And then all of a sudden you've got two $400,000 properties that might have $100,000 debt on each after you pay capital gains tax, etc., etc. And then they might produce something like 40 grand a year. Not a massive amount of money, to be honest. If you want to replace your income, the average wage across Australia, I think, is around $87,000 a year. And this is the model that a lot of buyers agents are using out there right now, right? The HMO Property Co, along with obviously the HMO properties that we produce and our NDIS properties, you can probably accelerate your wealth a lot faster with the NDIS because the cash flow from them is so much better. But the HMO looks like this. We've got a debt level that we start off with. And let's say that debt level, let's buy one property and let's just say it's worth $1 million. We need 200k in cash or equity to do this deal. There's going to be stamp duty, there's going to be holding costs during construction, so there's probably about another $80,000 to $100,000 worth of cash required to do one of these deals. And if we go back to the standard model, this might take 5 years, 10 years, etc. to create this $200,000 of equity. Depends how fast the market moves, depends how fast you can refinance, depends how aggressive you go. But buying lower priced properties is good because that's where a lot of the market is, in that affordable space, right? But if you don't want to play in that space, if you've already got a certain level of wealth accumulated in your principal place of residence or some other investment properties, what I also meant to say is the traditional buyers agency, they build these foundation of properties so that they can generate enough wealth to then sell them down and either pay down the debt on the best two, or sometimes they move that into higher yielding assets, commercial, HMO, NDIS, maybe some industrial. But essentially they help you build wealth by using capital growth and then moving that capital growth into higher yielding assets. So my question to you is, why go through all that rigmarole if we don't really need to? Why don't we use that cash to invest in a block of land in the same high growth suburbs that these buyers agents are talking about? We get the same capital growth over time. Let's call this a 10-year period. And if a property goes up in capital growth 7% per annum, using the rule of 72, which is how long it takes to double based on the rate of growth in that suburb. So if it's 7% per year divided by 72, that would say it would take 10 years for your property to double. If the growth is 10% per annum divided by 72, it would take 7.2 years for your property to double in value. It's a really simple calculation that I learned many years ago from Dimpner. But if we're looking at 7% per annum capital growth, it would take 10 years for your property to double in value. So you've got $1 million worth of equity there, because now your property is worth $2 million. But the benefit of having your loan set at principal and interest is, at the same time here, your debt position is reducing down to zero. So you haven't actually got $1 million worth of equity. You've now got $2 million worth of equity. Ooh, put my dollar sign on the wrong side of my two. You've got $2 million worth of equity, because whilst your property's been going up in value, you've been paying down the debt. And at various stages throughout this process, your LVR, come on iPad, don't let me down. Your LVR is reducing every single time, because the equity component is this bit here. Your equity component is your capital growth minus the debt reduction, means that your LVR is increasing rapidly over time, right? And if you're working now and you don't want to quit your job in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, let's say you've got 10 or 15 years left in the workforce, it's a very simple way for you to move cash from your principal place of residence, or you might have this cash saved up in your bank account. If you do, well done. But you've got to make this money work hard for you, so you don't have to work hard for your money. You cannot save your way to wealth. You need to invest in assets that appreciate in value, and even better, if they can produce a positive cash flow, then that's a win-win scenario, because income is the outcome that we're looking for. Now, at this point right here, the very start of the journey, when you invest in your first HMO, your cash flow is going to be quite low. It's going to be 5k to 10k per annum. Cash flow positive, right? Because we're paying principal and interest on this loan. If you've got 6 rooms that are renting out for $350 each, that's $109,000 worth of income from that property. And from that $109,000, we've got to take away vacancies, because we're never going to have 100% occupancy. We've got to take away property management fees and leasing fees. We've got to take away bills, gas, water, electric, internet, cleaners. We've got to take away interest and holding costs. That's why from $109,000 of income, you get down to $5,000 to $10,000 a year of cash flow, positive cash flow at a principal and interest loan. And everybody else is still sitting at interest only, and they're still negatively geared because they're not reducing debt. So they're relying just on capital growth to build wealth, but we're relying on capital growth and debt reduction to build wealth twice as fast. The result of this is, the more debt you pay down, the higher your income increases to. And that means you can use that additional income to extinguish the debt even faster. So let's say this is 10 years, so let's go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And every 2 years, your cash flow is going to increase by $10,000 a year. So 2 there, you're at 20. Now you're at 30. At 6 years, you're at 40. At 8 years, you're at 50 grand a year. And you're still paying down the debt. And then at year 10, when you extinguish the debt and you've got no interest costs and you've got no principal costs, if we factor in room rate increases at 3% per annum, your $109,000 of rental income is now $138,000 per year in rental income, with just 3% room rate increases every single year. Now, we could be more aggressive than this. We've seen some big jumps in room rates in some houses. We've also seen houses that haven't had such a big jump because they've been priced correctly, or they might have been overpriced in a period where there was a lot of people moving into the state. Let's go back 12, 18 months ago when we had all these people moving in. There was nowhere near as much housing. People were fighting over the rooms in the HMO space. The heat's coming out the market a little bit at the minute, but there's still lots of demand out there, right? And people are still looking for convenience, community, affordability, and living close to where they work. So the HMO will always be around. By the time you deduct all of the fees from your $138,000 a year, now you need to deduct your property management fees and your bills, and then you've got no mortgage anymore. And the result from that is you've got $100,000 of cash flow. Your property portfolio is doubling in value because we've seen 7% capital growth per annum, which again is super conservative. I think we've seen something like 11% capital growth between January and July 2024, and we're on point. Everyone's saying we're on target for another 20% capital growth. That's 40% capital growth over 2 years. But again, I'd rather be conservative and under promise and over deliver. And you know, if property prices continue to increase the way they are for another few years, if rents and room rates continue to increase the way they are, and once we see interest rates come back down as well, once the interest rates come down, that means your interest holding cost is lower, which means you can allocate that additional cash to your principal component and pay off your debt faster. Now, this is just one property, and 10 years later, you are debt-free with $100,000 a year of net cash flow. If we look at the other model, you've had to buy properties, you've had to sell properties, you've had to pay capital gain tax, you've had to work really hard to do this. You've had to pay stamp duty on 4 properties, you've had to pay 4 lots of buyer's agency fees. And the position that you're in isn't that good. $200,000 a year. Let's factor in the 10-year rule on this. So the properties have doubled. So your properties have gone from 400k to 800k over the 10-year period. You've still got to pay off your $400,000 mortgage. So you've made 1.2, $2.4 million. But the yield on these will probably be like 4 or 5%. And if we're investing in the exact same suburbs, we're going to see the same capital growth as them. So we can leverage into more properties as well and have more properties that are paying down debt and accumulating capital growth over time. So let's say within 2 years, your LVR is at a position where you can leverage into another HMO. And then we've got 2 properties which are essentially doing the same thing, going up in value, paying down debt, increasing your wealth position. We did a model on this for somebody just recently, and they were in a really good position equity-wise, and I'm seeing this a lot at the minute. Equity rich and cash flow poor. Really, really good portfolio. The majority of it was debt-free. However, there was still negative cash flow. And I showed them how they could use 50% of the equity component that they've got and move it into a HMO every single year for 5 years. And within 15 years, they would have 5 properties, debt-free, generating over $400,000 a year of net cash flow. And it's just a small tweak to that portfolio, right? And using the equity, the lazy equity that's sat there, to help them get from where they are, which is essentially the model of the buyer's agent, right? It's buying these high growth properties and then moving it into high cash flow properties, because you can't spend wealth, you can't spend capital growth. You can't go into Woolworths or Coles on a weekend with your balance sheet and say, look, I'm worth $10 million. Give me this basket of groceries. They'll say, no, But if you've got cash flow coming into your account every single month or year, you can definitely go into Woolies and Coles and buy your groceries with that. You can definitely go on holidays with that. You can definitely buy new cars and new clothes and pay for your kids' education and stuff like that with that. Or you can just allocate it towards your debt component and pay down your debt, so that by the time you're in your 50s and 60s, you can retire from work. You don't have to worry about what the banks are doing or what the cash rate is. Who cares about that? Because your debt position's so low, you're just like, man, I'm just on a massive, rapid plan to pay down debt so that I don't even have to worry about it. And you've just got a goose that lays golden eggs constantly, and you just live off them golden eggs. So I hope that helped. I know as I've tried to draw that out, I've thought to myself, this probably isn't the clearest explanation that I probably could have done, but I hope it did help you to kind of understand how this component here, the 10-year period where your property is double in value and you pay down the debt, paying down that debt has actually doubled your wealth position, because you don't have to sell these things to pay the bank off. You use the cash flow that these things produce to pay the bank off over time, and when interest rates come down, room rates increase, we can use that additional cash flow again to just keep compounding the debt down, so that you are debt free and well and truly cash flow positive in 10 years time when you're ready to quit your job. So I hope that helps, guys. This is the position that I'm putting my portfolio into now. Obviously with some of the new product that we're doing, we don't have that option because they're forcing us to go principal and interest. And I was thinking, pretty shit that they're actually making us do this. But when I sat down and modeled this out, and I was like, wow, let's look forward 5 years time for paying down debt. What does that actually look like? I mean, I'm in a position right now where I don't particularly need the cash flow because the business is generating stuff. I've got other things that are going on now as well. Got my fingers in a few pies. So it forced me to look at this in a different way. And when I've looked at it in a different way, I've thought, wow, this is actually more powerful than just the cash flow position. And if you want to purchase multiple of these, you want to leverage into these deals the same as what we do, or what the other buyers agents do with their standard foundational properties, we can do that potentially every 2 or 3 years, depending on how much the market moves and what your debt position is or what your LVR position is in that property portfolio as well. So I hope that helps, guys. I will see you all again next week. And remember, every master was once a disaster. Every winner was once a beginner.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you can stay up to date with all cash flow positive property updates.